the basic. Now, this one's pretty basic, right? But this one is for those who don't want the fluff, don't want the fancy, right? They want to be, they reckon that it's a bit hard to keep up with all the trends nowadays, right? They just want something that looks like a plank of wood, looks like a box that they can just sit in and rest, right? Hello there. Welcome in. Yes, this is the mattress shop. I know most people think that we're just a front for something, but I assure you we are perfectly legitimate and we perfectly sell beautiful mattresses for all the people within our city. So, are you here for some mattresses? You're not. Interesting. What are you here for? Oh, you're here for the mattresses for these kinds of people. Yes, I totally understand. Yes, of course. Yes. We have our selection. You've come certainly to the right place. So, please keep in mind, though, that this is a little bit of a secret. It's not something that we talk about too much, mainly because, the government does have a bit of a problem with us supporting our vampire brethren and vampire sisters. They really feel as if that if we end up helping you a bit too much, that you might overtake us. However, really, we just follow the money, right? If you've got money to throw around, you've been alive for so long, then why not target you as our audience, right? So that's not. Regardless, we have exactly what you're looking for, right? So let's get some information though, because there is a few things that we need to know, mostly because if, say, something were to happen, or if you decide to send, if you want to suck our blood or something like that, not saying that you're kind with certain, no offense meant, but we need to have some form of collateral, right? And, reporting you to the government so that you might, be taken and staked. That certainly will help ensure that we survive, right? So this is a mutual understanding, right? You could kill me right here, right now, but we're just doing business. And if you want to take over my business, then there's nothing I can do to stop you, unless, of course, I have some way of grasping you, metaphorically speaking, right? So, just could you give me your name, please? Okay. Interesting. All right, your name's Walter. Very old name. Okay. What would you say is your profession? Venture capitalist. Yes, of course. I would imagine a lot of your kind of venture capitalists, right? If you invest in the stock market, then I'm sure that it will, you don't have to work anymore, right? You only work for a little bit, and then money just builds upon itself. Yes, of course. And who would you say is the closest to you that's still living or dead, but animated, right? So, living or dead or animated. Okay. It's very sweet of you to put your mum in here. Very kind of you. Well, I suppose maybe, it's kind in a way, but also, she'd be the first to go if something were to happen. All right. Okay. We don't really need to ask this question. I don't think that applies to you. Okay. And what is it that brought you here? So, we know that you need a new bedding, right? New bedding for you. I understand that vampires don't necessarily sleep. However, they do rest within caskets, right? Funeral caskets. But I'm sure that you've had one for so long. Yeah. Okay. I see. So you've just broken up with your lover. Feels a bit fresh and a bit. You feel a bit wounded. I see. So you're just looking for a fresh start. Of course, yes. we deal a lot, and I think that you'd have a bit more emotional maturity for being alive for so long. But I suppose, if you haven't gone to therapy, then there's nothing I can do. All right. And lastly, how did you hear about us? Okay, so you did hear about it from another. That's a good chap that you have. Your friend is a very wonderful fellow, and we helped him along a while ago, and he has still, to this day, we still get people that come by and be like, he recommended you to us, and we appreciate the business, of course. Now, if I were to go over this disclaimer with you for now, this disclaimer basically says that you consent to us overcharging you based on how long you've lived, right? So for every year that you've passed the typical age of a human, that's going to be at the very least an extra 10% surcharge. We can call it what it is, right? It's an ageism fee. We are, we're really trying to work on it. However, ageism is really only an issue that is brought up only recently within, the cultural context and within humans. They're like, oh, you're 80 years old. You don't know what you're talking about anymore. We haven't even reached the idea that vampires might, you might have ageism against vampires. It's just, it's still a bit backwards. However. Okay, and that's the disclaimer. So 10% surcharge, so how long have you been alive now that you've known that? Don't lie. Okay. Interesting. Very honest. Very honest. I appreciate that. Some people try to lie, and it's very unfortunate because we do have a lie detector. Yes, he is called Henry. Yes, he is standing right over there. I'm sure if you turn around, you can say hi to him. Yes, he's very, very good at telling people, telling if someone is lying. So long as he doesn't object to whatever you say, then we are jolly good. All right then. Well, now that we've got everything all done in terms of your information, we can go ahead and get started with your options, right? So I'm sure you're here for a funeral casket. We need to keep in mind there's many different reasons that you as a vampire would have a funeral casket, but the main reason is comfortability and being able to stay in it during the day, right? So let's just have here a little bit a few funeral caskets to really keep in mind, right? So if we start over here, we've got your basic funeral casket, right? This one is just the general all-rounder. It's the Mario in Mario Party. It's the it's the all-rounder, right? You don't really there's no complaints about this one, but it's also one where you're not taking any risks. You as a vampire, you've lived your life for a very long time, and you're on life for a very, very long time. And I imagine that this, it used to be the bestseller. But since we've been established for quite a while now, we've found that more and more vampires are starting to branch out with all of the different options. Because this one, they're finding that, they only buy a funeral casket every once in who knows how long. They don't want to go with something basic because that's what they've had for a very long time, living in the fringes of society. They have to sneak up funeral caskets away. So I would truly say, so long as you have money, which you obviously do, I wouldn't recommend this one. Not unless you sort of during your life, if you perhaps were very poor and when you died, they didn't get you a funeral casket. Maybe this could somehow heal some of that trauma, so think deep within yourself, right? Were you in poverty when you were alive, and when you were turned into a vampire, did you end up having your sort of life funeral, with all your family and friends. Could they afford an actual funeral casket for you? Okay, so let's move on. Over here we have, of course, the lovers. The lover's funeral casket. This is very good because it's good in multiple ways, right? It says something. It says that you are heartthrob, you are sexy, you are the life of the party, but it's also that you are trustworthy, you're monogamous. Not that if you're not monogamous doesn't mean that you're not trustworthy, you just have to be very upfront with your intentions. What I mean is that you're very sweet, right? So you would have one person who would sleep here, right? Who would rest here, and then the other one would rest here, right? And you would have your legs tangled up, right? This is not for the touch sensitive. There are some vampires, they're very touch sensitive, similar to how you would a human would need to invite a vampire into your home. Vampires need to invite the touch of other vampires to be allowed to touch one another. This is something that I've learned through my research of you guys, right? So this is one where if you are exhausted and you want to rest for the day, and your lover is here and you have to wake them up and be like, excuse me, I just need you to invite my touch. This could be a bit of a problem. However, this is for people that really want to be tangled with each other all the time, right? I would also say that this is one that I've noticed people have started to get, mainly because they find it very, very quite nice, really. Like they find themselves wanting that bonding with another person, right? With another vampire, another undead. So definitely this is one that is very, very popular, becoming very popular. Next we have this one. This one's a bit interesting. It's shaped like a steak, right? And by a steak, I do mean the kind that kills vampires. This is for the daring. This is for the edgy, for the daring, for the emo, for the, and vampires, you're all over the place when it comes to that. However, this is really, you're inviting the idea of becoming dead and not just undead, right? You're toying with that idea. You play with it, right? You'll be a bit of an artist in that way. And if you do this, it's really, really, it says something, right? People won't mess with you. They're going to be a little bit afraid of you. And if you're all right with that, then that is something that really is truly an option. And think about it this way, right? The shape, right? You have so much space in the upper area, but you have to be very constrained at the bottom area. It's very metaphorical in that way. You're going to be limiting yourself, because vampires, you like to throw parties. Your funeral casket is definitely something that people will end up seeing, and so it's definitely a downer, especially if you have vampire friends who do know others who have been staked. It's truly it's a bit of a touchy subject. However, there's always the alternative folk, and this is the way to do it. So next we've got the star funeral coffin. So the casket. This one is very interesting because I found that there are two types of vampires that will go for this one. The first are the polyamorous kind, right? The people who want to be in a throuple, what's it called? A polycule, that's right. What this provides a very good option of the heart, but in a star form, right? You could have someone who the head starts here, legs are here. Another person head starts here, legs here. Another person head starts here, legs here. It's very intertwiney, very lots of touching, and a lot of very, very important bonding between vampires, right? And so this is very, very popular among among that kind of vampire. And it's not one that I would personally recommend, mainly because the part that's touching is like the crotch groin area with in the hip area. The hip ends up touching with everybody else, and it's just, I personally wouldn't find it very what's the word, very comfortable, but I also wouldn't find the heart very comfortable, and that one's very popular. So you do you. People love this, so people love this also, so I would say that for sure. However, the second vampire that would truly love this star is the musical theatre kid, right? The one that loves themselves so much. They're a bit narcissistic. All vampires are a bit narcissistic, aren't they? It's quite fascinating, right? If you've lived for so long, you think that you are the center of the universe. And sometimes I want to just grab a vampire and be like, hello, you are not the center of the universe. The center of the universe is me. However, for this, what would end up happening is each arm, so one arm here, head up here, one leg, you'd be like a starfish. And it's, instead of doing that, the very typical pose, you'd be starfishing. And that's very interesting, because I think that really breaks the social norms of a vampire, right? But really, no one's going to see you resting unless you are with someone else. And if you're going for this, you're either going for it because you want to be in sort of like a polycule situation, or you're so narcissistic that you don't want anyone else within your resting area, right? So really very versatile. Next, we've got the basic. Now, this one's pretty basic, right? But this one is for those who don't want the fluff, don't want the fancy, right? They want to be, they reckon that it's a bit hard to keep up with all the trends nowadays, right? They just want something that looks like a plank of wood, looks like a box that they can just sit in and rest, right? This is the option for that. And what's very fascinating about this, right, is it's very inconspicuous. You can put that anywhere. You could really rest in a construction site. You could be in the sewers. You could be anywhere, really. You could even put this in sort of like a church. I know vampires and church don't really mix very well, but I'm just saying, you could put this in many different places and you wouldn't really think too much about it, because it wouldn't really read very you could almost actually, this would be very popular for people that want to ship themselves off somewhere, right? You could just take a wee nap, take a little rest, and as you're going about your day resting, just put a address label on it and ship yourself off. No one would know the better. Now this one over here, this is the Rose funeral casket. Now this one's a bit interesting, right? This is for the bachelors. And yes, I do mean the bachelors, the people who do get on the TV show The Bachelor, the Vampire Bachelor, of course. So this is sort of, it's more of a promotional item, right? Not many people go for it. It's not particularly popular, but it is 50% off, so keep that in mind. I would say that the person that would go for this, who isn't a bachelor, would be someone who, I wouldn't say they're narcissistic. They're not really into themselves. It's more that they're confident, right? And they have a picture of themselves that they may or may not really fit. So I would say I would be a bit cautious about this one, because this one really, it's giving like lover boy. It's giving what's the word? Lover girl, right? Like you're wanting something and you're going for it, but you're not really committing. It's a very anti-commitment funeral casket. It does come, not unfortunately, it would be fortunately, it really depends on how you feel, but this one definitely comes. When you open it, it's filled with rose petals, which can be pretty nice. However, they do start to rot after a while, and it gives a very spooky vibe. So that's that for you. Moving on, this one's the bat funeral casket. It's the pun, vampires and bats, and this one was made as a little bit of a joke, but vampires really started to love it. They had such a giggle when they were looking at this. I was fascinated. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not one that I thought would be very popular, but this is actually one of the most popular that we have. I think it's because we don't get a lot of vampire children, because I think it is unethical to turn children into vampire children. However, you do have the occasional vampire child, and they absolutely love puns. And I think that's really infected the vampire community. So puns are just so rare that I think that in the vampire community, it's just that you guys have not been you've not been particularly exposed to a lot of puns. So this is just, see, you're giggling right now. It's very funny. Yes. So you've got that, there's not much else to say about it. You're a bit immature if you want this one, but I'm happy about it. This one here is an alternative to this. This is the duo coffin. So what ends up happening with this one is that you have one person that can rest here and the other person rests here, and you are together, right? It's connected. However, you can feel free to leave and come as you may. This is for the healthy relationship types that, we've been together for hundreds of years, and you have your own life and I have my own life, and we have our life together. So sometimes I'll be resting and you won't, and then you'll be resting and I won't. And so this is for the ones that really have an idea of and set schedules, and they're not always together, like you and your partner are not always together. Now, this also works for the people that would be in the polycule. However, it only works up to a certain height, because you need to be able to fit in here, and the other person fits in here, and then you have a third person that can fit here, and a fourth person that can fit here. Now, we do custom make these, so if you want it, we can customize it to your own specifications. But of course, this unfortunately only depicts 4. However, we can always add more. We'd add a bit more, and that way your polycule could be as large as you want, and you could all share the same funeral casket. So that is the other option. And then our last option here in terms of funeral casket, this is one where you don't really want the starfish, the star funeral casket, because you're really not very narcissistic, but you do want to be able to stretch out sometimes, right? And so this is sort of like the snow angel funeral casket. It's one where you can stretch, you can really move yourself, but you still conform to the rules of vampire society, right? Now that we've gone through every option, you've got them in mind. Keep each one in mind, because you've got to know what you want, but we still have a few more things to go over, right? Just a touch, something to keep in mind, right? So over here we just have what material do you want your funeral casket to be made out of? And it's going to be very few options, but it's very, very important, right? So we do have wood, right? Simple wood, very nice. It does, it does end up getting a bit, what's the word? It ages well, but not particularly. Like if you're living or living for over 150, 200 years, this can get a bit iffy, and you might have to come back. We do treat our wood, and you can pick any wood you want: oak, willow, any form of wood that you would like, we can absolutely make. However, and it's the basics, right? It's just purely basic. We do also have cinder blocks, concrete cinder blocks. It also fits within this category. If you wanted something it's a bit more sturdy, a bit more lasting, right? You want something where you can't punch through it, right? Then this would be a really good option. However, I will warn, as vampires, I know you're very strong, but some vampires have reported that they've had a really, really hard time actually being able to lift the coffin, the top off, and so it becomes a bit of a problem if you're a bit weak, right? I would say just hit the gym, but I'm not really sure if your muscles can grow anymore once you're a vampire. That's something that I honestly have not really thought about until now. So how about you tell me, can you? Okay, so you can. It's very interesting. You're sort of alive, but you're not, and you're sort of dead, but you're not. So just hit the gym. So next, of course, we have radioactive waste. This would be very good. You are undead, right? So you wouldn't die by any normal means. So you can make any of the funeral caskets in radioactive waste, and what will end up happening is that it will really keep you safe. It'll keep you protected. It does have a bit of a smell, I won't lie. However, it's for the preppers, right? It's for the preppers of the vampire world. You really want to make sure that if you want to make sure that you don't die, if you aren't staked in the middle of the day by raging humans that don't know any better, and by don't know any better I mean they're very ignorant, right? Then this would be the way to go. Now this one over here, so this would be similar to wood, except it would be made out of twigs and sticks. This would be very good if you don't really want you want it like a baby bird vibe, right? You want to be in a nest. You want to feel like you're being cradled by nature, right? I've sort of seen this. It's a very interesting feeling that vampires end up having, that I've talked a lot with vampires. They end up telling me about how they feel like really they lose connection with nature, right? Because like you're not alive anymore, and most of nature, if not all of nature, is alive. So you end up feeling very disconnected, like you're not part of the like natural cycle anymore. And so this is to help you feel like you're part of the natural cycle again. And it's to help you feel like it's there protecting you, and it's there helping you rest, right? So it's really for those that need a little bit of, what's the word? They need a little bit of comfort, right? Just a bit of comfort. Over here we can also make your funeral casket out of regular bricks, right? I love a good brick texture, right? I am the biggest fan of bricks, and we can do really tiny bricks to make up the funeral casket. And what this will do is it gives you sort of the cinder block feeling. It gives you a bit of the, what's the word? It gives you a bit of the concrete feeling. However, it also gives you a bit of a homey feeling. You could have vines that are climbing, like nice greenery that would cling on a lot more than the concrete. And also you get that nice terracotta color with bricks that you really can't get with the cement, at least not naturally, right? So this is definitely one of my favorite options, I would say. And then of course we've got syringes of blood. Now this would be very fun because it's sort of like think of it like a beard, right? A lot of men end up having very long beards, and they keep little snacks in them. This would be very similar, right? Think of your literal bed, your literal funeral casket is made of syringes of blood. At any point you could just press it and have a little blood come out. Blood doesn't go bad. It's very interesting, right? Some of them have some expiration, the expiration date is merely a suggestion. So this would be very, very good for those who sort of a bit of hungry vampires, pretty new vampires, or just those who are a bit slobbish, I would say. And then of course the last one, teeth. You could make your funeral casket out of teeth. It's very, very common and very nice because it sort of reminds you of your own teeth, and it reminds you of your vampire teeth and how different you are, right? It really screams mentally healthy. So this is definitely, and of course, this little dot right here, I don't know if you can, yes, you can see it, this little dot, it's obviously a cavity, but it's it's like a beauty mark, right, for the tooth. It's nice cavity beauty mark. And every tooth will have it. Trust me, we only get cavity filled teeth. So, which of the options would you like your funeral casket to be made out of? Okay, you know what? I'm impressed. Not many people would make that choice. But you know what? I think that when you know yourself, I think that you can't make a wrong choice. Okay. Wonderful. So I will get that started for you. You will have to come back to pick it up because we do make it custom. If you go to the other department, they will measure you out so that we make the perfect fitting funeral casket for you. Okay. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you needed from me today? Wonderful then. Great. All right. Well, I will see you later. And you have a wonderful evening and make sure to stay out of the sun. All right then. Bye-bye.